We got quite a bit more information from St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter on that cyber attack / ransomware attack in St. Paul. It happened a couple of weeks ago. If you remember, it triggered a state of emergency, which they're still in, by the way. The National Guard's IT units were activated, and we really didn't know a whole lot for the first week or so, other than it shut down most of the city's online services, things like 911, those things still working just fine. But now more information has been coming out, kind of almost like a fire hose in the last couple of days. Mayor Melvin Carter sharing a lot more, including who's behind it, what they have, how much they have, they think, and what they're doing with it. Joining me now is Eric Brown with IT Audit Labs. Also was a Chief Information Security Officer at one time for Ramsey County. But in the trenches in situations like this, Eric, thank you for joining us again.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, Amy.
So Mayor Melvin Carter, rattled off a lot of information. We had a live news conference yesterday during the newscast, and it started with numbers about terabytes and gigabytes and things. So I want you to help us decode some of that. But I want to start with who is behind this. What do we know?
Sure. So what we know, or what's being reported, is it's the Interlock ransomware group. And this is a group that's been fairly prolific since last fall. I'm seeing indications that they've attacked over maybe 25 or 30 different businesses around the businesses, school districts, and governments around the United States, and a couple in the UK as well.
So how hard is it to track them down?
Well, I think you really only know who the attacking entity is when you get that ransomware note, or you find the indicators of compromise that they use to go after an organization. So a group like Interlock, they have some custom developed software that they use to install on the victim's computers. And that kind of leaves a signature of who is actually trying to steal this data.
Okay. Now, the city initially, Mayor Melvin Carter said there was no ransom involved. We knew there were bad actors, but he said there's no ransom. And then in time now we clearly know that there was ransom. He also says the city has not paid any ransom. Does that make sense to you, that train of information that we've gotten?
Well, it's interesting. And a group like Interlock, they'll do a double ransomware technique where they'll steal data, and that's what happened in St. Paul, where it's been reported that so far about 43 gigabytes of data has been stolen, and that data was held for ransom. And if the organization didn't pay, then that data is released, which I think is what we're seeing happening. And then systems within the organization too can be encrypted. So it's that double level. It's the encryption piece, which locks you out of systems. And then it's the data theft and holding that data as ransom.
Okay. And we learned, I think it was the city's park and recreation shared server information that's now been posted online. When you talk about 43 gigs, I mean, can you help us understand, is there any way to put that in context of how much information that is?
It's quite a bit of information. Maybe just to put things into perspective, these days, most mobile phones have around 32 to maybe 64 gigs for kind of an average phone. Some can go up to a terabyte, but for the most part, that's a good round number. Your operating system on your computer can be around 60 gigs. So it is a lot of data. It could be thousands of movies worth of data, depending on how large that movie file is. But it's certainly not a small amount of data when you talk about files like Word documents or Excel sheets. What could contribute to the larger size is if there are a lot of image files, so city planning files or images that the threat actors may have stolen. That can be large amounts of data.
Okay. I think the mayor yesterday was saying anything from, he didn't seem too alarmed at the type of information that was out there as far as, social security numbers and things like that. That didn't seem to be what's out there. What seemed to be, he said everything from images, drafts of just documents internally that weren't, were relatively benign, things like recipes, even, anything that would have been on there. But I guess my question is, so they haven't paid the ransom, and there's the 43 gigs that's been posted publicly. Is this then typically the starting point for the bad actors? Do they ramp things up, and is it possible they have a lot more and maybe more sensitive information, and they're just going to see how far they can go to get what they want?
Hopefully this is all they have, but typically they'll usually issue a threat to pay, and if payment isn't received, then they'll release some data. And they may threaten that they have more data, and they may be sharing what they have privately through the cyber teams that are working on behalf of St. Paul and doing that negotiation with the threat actor. But typically they will release some data and then try to hold back data that might be more valuable in order to have that ransom paid.
Okay.
And hopefully that's not the case here.
Yeah, absolutely. One more just quick question, and I know this may not be under your purview exactly. I know the FBI is leading this criminal investigation, but in cases that are similar in magnitude like this or type, in Texas City, what could a success rate be for catching the bad guys in something like this? Because it seems like it would just be almost impossible.
It is really tough, especially when you have entities that are working overseas and behind different countries that have different laws. I do know that the FBI and our law enforcement teams do maintain and they do track these threat actors. And oftentimes you will see that years later an arrest has been made for something that was done years before, because they are actively trying to monitor and catch these people.
Okay. You and I have talked about the collateral damage that happens here, especially financially. And we saw yesterday, the first day of thousands of city employees physically walking into Roy Wilkins Auditorium to get their passwords reset. I know you can't put a number on it, but what is the cost here? Time lost, inability to access city online services, the mitigation, proactively adding protection moving forward. What does this all mean for the city of St. Paul on a sort of a bottom line budget answer?
That's a great question, Amy. And it's no doubt going to be expensive, and hopefully they'll get some assistance from the federal government or state government to augment some of their finances related to this. Certainly there may be an insurance play where insurance steps in. And some of that, the communication that have been coming out from the offices are typically issued in conjunction with what the cyber insurer wants to release to the public, because there may be some back end conversations going on with the threat actors. So oftentimes you don't always get the full story up front, because there are legal teams involved, there are insurance teams involved, and that information is sometimes kept a little closer and then released later when appropriate.
Wow. Well, Eric, thank you for jumping on here and just kind of giving us some insight into this and making it understandable, because there's so much here that is hard to keep track of. And it's a world that we really haven't had been exposed to at this level here, a lot of us. So really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy.
All right. Eric Brown, IT Audit Labs.